time to be spent with you is going to be divided into two presentations, which I will present from an automotive perspective, since I come from an automotive background. But that pretty much summarizes the whole design potential across various industries, because the automobile is the motherlode of all industries. In that sense, it's at the top hierarchy level. So I'll present the first presentation on what is design and why is design so important going forward. The second part of my presentation would be what makes us tick. The very fact that you guys have invited me here means that you have the curiosity to know how we started, why we started, what role we play, and in the conclusion would be the projects that we have done thus far, and that's really the eye candy for most students, because the diversity of the projects, and at the conclusion of that I will take questions. And I must implore you to ask me as many questions as you feel like, of course time permitting. I have to leave at 11:30, but we'll try to pack in as many students as many questions as possible. So, this is the, as I said, the presentation is the backdrop of an automotive industry, but it applies to just about every other industry, including service industries. Now, this is a very telling slide, and this is pertaining to India, that even in India, the design weightage factor of an automobile in most segments is higher than the related factors of reliability and performance. So what it says is that reliability, performance, fuel efficiency, and the serviceability and the retained value are taken for granted across segments, across brands. And the reason why a car sells better than car B is primarily because of the way it handles design, or the way it's designed. So in an increasingly bland world, daredevil styles and designs may be the only salvation if auto majors are to survive in the world of excessive capacity. So on the one hand, you have excess capacity across the world, primarily because the auto industry is seen as the backbone of most industrial nations. In fact, the worth of a nation is measured by the maturity of its automotive industry. So every country has its own automotive industry, and therefore they build barriers around them. While on the other hand, in an increasingly globalized world, you have many brands competing with the same segment, and one of the reasons why they would be able to compete and grow is, as I said earlier, the weightage of the design factor, or the desirability of its design. Design has to do more with the matters of the heart, and we aim to develop vehicles which not only embody technological perfection, but have the power to stir the emotions. So, of late you hear in the world of automotive marketing, the words like emotion, engagement have becoming very, very common, and you can only sell a car if it stirs your emotions, or if it's able to stir your emotions as well. And therefore the main factor of differentiating cars, or the main USP of differentiating it from others, centers around the activity of design. So car designs, like fashion, appeal to the emotions, and automakers must strike quickly with a hit before trends change. This is, of course, a challenge going forward, because usually it takes 5 years from the sketch to the car being on the roads, and the tastes are changing far faster. The world is getting more restless, and therefore the dilemma before car makers is, how do you really compress the time to market the vehicles from the time you actually dream and think about it. So, 72 million cars, that's the annual production of cars around the globe. However, 80% of the vehicles are sold in mature and saturated markets, and therefore, in those markets, you can imagine that the pressure on getting a customer sale really rests on the ability of the designers to create a vehicle that is desirable. And there are at any point of time 4,800 different types, shapes and sizes at any given time, at any point of time in the world. So usually the design industry works on the principle of you have to, if it's a mainstream program, you generally create 10 to 20 iterations of full-scale models, then you whittle down to 5 or 6, and then you freeze on one. And the primary reason for that is, I don't know if most of you are aware or not, but it takes about $1 billion at least to put a car on the road from an international standpoint of view. And in India, the costs are slightly lower, so it could be about 1,000 to 2,000 crores. However, that is also very, very substantially high. So, and the fact that the cars are going to be sold increasingly on the basis of the desirability of the design, the burden or the onus on the designer is huge. And so you got to, the managements usually try to have as many projects as possible to oversee them, and then they will select the best out of them. So one of the reasons why design is playing a ever increasingly role is also because the profit margins of car makers due to excessive capacity and competition has declined over the years. And one can see that in the 60s, the golden era for the American auto industry was primarily because every year you had new models, every year. And the industry was geared towards that, and therefore the profit margins were the highest in the 60s. Of course, in the 20s, you had a different situation where you had people who made the aggregates, the chassis and the engine, and you actually went out to a coach builder to create your own design coachwork. That's when the profits were the highest. So again, the designers are called upon to really help sell the cars, and therefore that's one of the key elements for car makers to really ensure that their products do well. So design is a fundamental soul of a man-made creation. Design is not a surface thing or a predefined thing just. Designers are people who think with their hearts. Design is not all about like or dislike, it's about passion, emotion, and attachment. As I said earlier in the slide, design is the #1 determinant of whether a product, service, experience stands out or not. Some of the quotes of the famous people, some are living, of course, some have, some are deceased, but this is very telling, and it holds good ever increasingly more. So it's the age of design. We've tried to capture the other phases of the activities. In the 40s, you had the raw materials economy. In the 50s, you had the goods economy. In the 70s, you had the service economy. In the 90s, you had the experience economy. And of course, we are now living as, of course, led by the United States. It leads us, it actually influences all the markets around the world. We are in the midst of a creative economy, and in India and China and Asia usually has a lag, We are about 10 years behind US as of now, but the gap is increasingly getting narrowed. And of course, we are headed towards the shared economy with the likes of the Ubers of the world and Airbnb. So this is where the future lies. It's you know, it's this slide is all about how a small you know, city in Italy, in Turin, how design is the livelihood of a lot of companies and who have made a mark in the world. So you have 7,000 people and 520 completed prototypes and 128 into production. This is on an annual basis. So change is inevitable. It's the only constant in life. Some of the quotations. And this is one of Steve Jobs' his of course given to very irrational statements, but to him design was more important than functionality. Of course, Apple married the two quite well, and that's why you have one of the most successful companies on the face of earth. In fact, you know, as designers, we are proud of him because he's made a design-led company the most valuable company on the face of earth for almost 7-8 years running now. And that really goes to show how, you know, much as we don't understand the activity of design, it's mumbo numbo, but at the same time, if you master it, it really gives a competitive edge to the company or to the person that is in that profession. Of course, we are all heading to the shared economy, and you know, I'm asked many times, what is the car of the future? And to me, it seems increasingly clear that, you know, for the first time in the last, since the last 100 years, the last couple of years, the kilometers traveled have been reducing. It's the first time it's happening in 100 years. And that means that people are really giving up on the ownership of cars. However, my belief is that cars will be used on weekends, so that cars will be bought for leisure or adventure, which means that much of the entry-level cars which are used for commuting will actually fade away. And that's my prophecy for the future. That's what I preempted the slide. I'm sorry about that, but this is how I see, and this is what the trends portend. Alternate propulsions, of course, the electric car had made you know, good headway. However, it seems to have plateaued for the cost of crude oil having come down. There's no real impetus to really have an electric car for the sake of efficiency. However, governments are going to enable this movement because of the ecological reasons. And therefore, there are several alternate propulsions being readied. Some have attained criticality, and some have yet to attain that. And I said, these segments are going to be disruptive. I don't personally see entry-level cars or cars being used for commute in the larger sense of the word. Of course, you will have exceptions, but stemming from influences from the Western world, People are increasingly staying at home, doing their jobs from home, they're shopping from home, and therefore the need of a car is getting reduced. Even in cities like Bombay, in my own family, there are cars that are not being used. In fact, we've sold some of them because my children take an Uber wherever they need to go. So you're already seeing a change and a disruption in these segments. Good design has to be relevant for a quarter century. This is also from an automotive perspective, and I must tell you why. Primarily, as I said, from sketch to the car on the road, it takes about 5 years. From there on, the car is going to be used for 7 to 8 years. The car is going to be sold for 7 to 8 years. So you have 5 plus 8 is 13. And the last guy who buys it at the end of his cycle run is going to use it for 8 to 10 years. So a good designer is one whose design has been timeless, or whose design has been desirable for the better part of 20-25 years. So the worth of a designer is usually measured if his designs have been timeless for a quarter of a century. On the one hand, you got to really levitate yourself into the future from a designer's point of view. He has to levitate himself at least 15 to 20 years ahead into the future, try to understand what will still be trendy enough for the car to be sold. So this is the automotive value chain. If you see, the design component is a very small component from the design pie. However, it occupies the top pinnacle. It's the start and end of the success of the car companies. So it's a small segment, but sitting right on top in terms of importance. So typical costs of developing an automotive program, it's about 1 to 3 million man-hours typical. Of course, there are some exceptions which can go to 5 million man-hours depending on the nature of the product. If it's a global product, it has to have multiple regulation compliances, then the man-hours go up. Typical cost of engineering this program is about 800 euros per hour in Europe or US. And in India, the cost is about 60 euros per hour. As a thumb rule, sum total of all the activities put together. So you can see that, at the very minimum, it's about 800 million euros, going up to maybe 3 billion euros. And Indian costs about 60 euros, so about 60 million euros to 1 million euros if the program is done in India. Therefore, India has a cost arbitrage, and I expect the engineering services and the R&D services and design and development services out of India to actually leapfrog at a faster clip than what it's been doing thus now. Primarily because we have not been able to showcase the prowess of Indian engineering, but as more and more programs are being done in India, I am convinced that in the next 10 years is going to be quite a growth phase for automotive engineering services or product design, etc. One of the other reasons why it's expected to be growing very fairly fast is, on the one hand, you have immense competition, so you need to come out with newer and new products at a faster and faster cycle. Also, particularly from an India-China perspective, our car penetration is abysmally low, and therefore, much as in the West, everybody has a car, like everyone has a phone, I expect in India, that same situation will happen. In fact, it's already happening. Nevertheless, these are the statistics. 113 cars per 1,000 people in China and 18 cars per 1,000 people in India. So even if you have to actually come to Chinese statistics, you still have a huge upside and a huge growth ahead of us for the auto industry. Of course, the international norm is for mature markets is 750 to 900 cars per cars. Sorry, say 700 to 900 cars per thousand people. I'm sorry for the last this thing. That should be per thousand people. So design outfits are usually captives of car makers. They are not for profit. They're hugely expensive to run, and typical annual costs run about $125 million annually. Usually, each brand has design centers in each continent, or at least in their major markets. For example, Toyota would have in Southern Europe, it would have in North America, it would have in Japan, it would probably have in China, and things like that, centers like that. So that was the, an overview of the automotive design scenario backdrop of that. And of course, you might have some queries, questions. You can ask me at the end of this presentation. I'll be glad to answer them for you. The next part of my presentation is why DC design came into being, what it does, why is it so unique, why is it fiercely independent in a world where most design outfits are captives of car makers. And then, of course, the portfolio, which is an eye candy for most of you, and then the questions. So this is a basis of the ongoing presentation. So the philosophy at DC Design has been, we would never do a project if we are not convinced of the wow principle. So anything that we do has to be a wow. We have never taken a project for the sake of revenue, because subconsciously we are trying to build a portfolio, and portfolio for not only for a company but also for India, because in the automotive world is very difficult to build a brand in the short term. Much like other industries in the automotive world, the brands that you know of have been incepted 40-50 years back. And it usually takes about 20 to 30 years to build a brand in any of the services in the auto industry that you're trying to cater to. And therefore, we realized that every single day of our life, we had to do something that could add to our portfolio for us to market across the world. And the vision was from being a major player in the automotive design and development field to transit into a globally acclaimed OEM, which we have just done. Some of you must have seen our first car, the Avanti. It's, I think, displayed somewhere in your grounds. So, our place under the sun is our ability to do standout products, to create extreme products for extreme individuals, and be a niche volume player in the automotive industry. We want to harness the leverage of being independent or being able to sign off projects with the car manufacturer may not be able to do, and that's our USP primarily. That's me. I won't dwell much longer, except that I'm a product of Art Centre, College of Design. It's a preeminent design school. It's situated in the Pasadena suburb of Los Angeles. 90% of the chief car designers of most car companies come from this school. It's preeminent in that sense. And I came down for various reasons to head this and create this DC Design, a very unique enterprise in India. Some of the milestones. Of course, it was very heartening that, within 10 years, less than 10 years of our inception, we were able to break through and compete with the best Italian design and development outfits with the Aston Martin V8 Vantage project. some of our facilities. We have three manufacturing facilities from a design perspective in Mumbai, Pune and Gurgaon. Of course, the nerve center happens to be Pune, and also our car manufacturing unit is now in Pune. And since we are a B2B and a B2C player, we also have 10 showrooms across India. And we're just going to move into a new facility close to Pune, Talegaon. Some of the competencies that we have, so in effect, we have the complete value chain of a large automotive corporate, right from marketing research to actually, producing a car in volumes, in niche volumes, 4,000 to 5,000 cars a year. Some of the revenue streams that we have, which are standard products, so we have invested into these programs because we feel there would be a sizable market. So we have standard products in the HCV, LCV and passenger cars, custom products where we cater to one-offs, again in those HCV, armored cars, passenger cars and specialty vehicles. Of course, completely built up units. The Avanti is the first one of it which has gone into production, example which is I think in your property. Then we dabble into art, we dabble into aviation, we have had some projects successfully completed. We have a education tie-up with Devi Patil in Pune, and we are now an OEM. So if you see the diversity of our activity is quite amazing to some people and to most people as well. The client list is the who's who of the B2B and the B2C world. I think we take particular pride in the fact that we are one of the few companies who straddle the B2B and the B2C segments. Not very many companies can straddle both these. So our client list reads a who's who of the corporate and the elite people in the world. Some of the testimonials. It's very heartening to get actually letters from Airbus and Renault, and within, between the lines, if you read, and actually they're very, very impressed with what we're doing, and they're quite surprised that we're doing it out of India. So this is a very important slide, and I'm sure this will throw up a lot of questions at the end of this presentation. What makes DC Design tick is some of the bedrock values that we have, and I'll narrate them briefly, but of course, I'm sure you'll have a lot more curiosity on that. We believe that we got success because it was an eponymous company. Of course, I'm talking to you in hindsight. Because the company was named after me and there is a stigma attached to failure, you tend to walk the extra mile because you cannot afford to fail. And that actually sets the tone to the DNA and the culture of your company. You have to succeed. It's not just about money, And because of that, you imbibe certain other aspects, personality traits of the organization, of humility, of several other things which I'll narrate later on. I personally believe that it's not enough to be passionate about what you do. The key word is to be obsessively passionate. I think that's the underlying difference. To be obsessively passionate, it means you have to be 100% passionate about your craft, about your hobby. For example, if somebody wrote to me and he sent me a resume, or he sent me his portfolio of cars and bikes and phones and what have you, I would never really even bother to invite him or call him. Our HR department wouldn't even call him. We set certain norms. So if somebody said, I only love cars, cars, cars. And that's something that we know he's going to be obsessively passionate about. So that's what I'm trying to say. You have to be obsessively passionate in a very narrowly focused manner. In that sense, you can't be jack of all trades and master of none. Early bird gets the worm. We have always tried to breach envelope. We have tried to get into newer and newer, segments. We have taken great risks, and that's one of the reasons why you see we are able to straddle the passenger car, LCV, HCV, aviation, and all these segments. And therefore, you create an impression, and you have a foothold in that segment fairly early on. So we are never in a situation where the market forces us to be in that segment. We ourselves have the first mover advantage. Intangible mastering, I realized early on, in fact it's so true today, that the brand intrinsic value can be much higher than the value of your physical assets. And that can only come across if you are able to master the intangibles. Of course, it takes a lot longer, but once you have mastered the intangibles, they cannot be broken down or breached very easily by your competition. And therefore, to come about or to own the expertise of design, or to own a space, or mind recall of being good at design is far more valuable than having land and buildings. And that's what we realized early on. So disruptive, USP, you have to have some disruptive USP. In our case, it was the ability to, mate digital engineering with craftsmanship. So, for example, we get data from across the world, maybe from BMW, maybe from Renault, maybe from the US, and we are able to ship them out physical prototypes or physical objects. And that was a key USP, and that works still today. Of course, we were using the arbitrage of labor in that sense. So the diversity of customers and products, as I said, we have a very dynamic matrix of products and services. Right from the customer of B2B to B2C, and also on products where you're doing cars, you're doing buses, you're doing special projects, and what have you. Self-obsolescence, this is something that we firmly believe it's not good enough for us to create a new product. We have to ask ourselves all the time, have we created a product that if it were to be put in any part of the world, it would battle with the other competitors in that region. Paranoia, we take pride in the fact that we are a paranoid organization. I think that's one of the reasons why we take everything seriously. No issue or no person is small enough for us to gloss over. Casting the net wide, our products and services have to be relevant across the globe and not just to the market that we are in. Back to the wall is a very, we put ourselves to the back of the wall all the time, and that's how we have succeeded, and that's how we have actually grown, and that's how we have got the admiration of the country. For I believe that unless you put yourself to, unless you put yourself at the back of to the back of the wall, you are really not going to succeed hugely, primarily because your survival instincts take over, and you always have choices. And if you have your back to the wall, you are forced to innovate, you're forced to deliver, because you're forced to survive. Long-term versus short-term. This is a judgment call that you have to make on yourself. If you care for short-term benefits, you're going to actually burn out earlier. You're going to lose out the long-term, brand or positioning that you build for yourself or for the company. So this is the portfolio of a company. Standard products, heavy commercial vehicles. These are some of the large vehicles like Mercedes, Scania, and Volvo. These are used for intercity travel. Um, our USP is what a manufacturer will not or cannot do. So our market positioning is very, very clear that we cannot compete with the large OEMs, and therefore we will only do what either they cannot do because of skills or because of scale. Some of the light commercial vehicles, these are primarily owned by corporates or individuals. The earlier slides of the standard products on the heavy commercial vehicles were largely used for business purposes, for companies' competitive advantage. So you would have a company that came to us ordering 10, 20, 30 buses. These are largely privately owned, used for maybe travel by the executive corps or large families. Some of the standard products on passenger cars. When we say standard products, in the sense that we have invested in these programs so that the cost per conversion is far lower than one-offs. Some of the standard products that we exported across the world. Each of these passenger car standard products have to have certain value premises, and usually that starts with comfort, and then entertainment, and then ambience, and in some cases privacy. These are the custom projects which are one-offs, and these tend to be these tend to come from either film stars or politicians or corporate heads, and they are catering to a specific need or specific purpose. And because they are one-off, they tend to be quite expensive as well. Sorry. Some of the armored segments. This is the H1 Hummer that we did for a Saudi billionaire. So while the exterior of the vehicle was stock except for a few bits of accessories, the interior was really very conceptual and very futuristic in nature. So the replicas. The Rolls-Royce Sport Coupe for some rich British customers. This was our 500th project in August 2004, and we have a world record for the largest or the largest number of ground-up designs in the world. Some of the Mercedes vans, which are actually benchmarked to private jets of these customers. You usually have private jets when they fly. A shortened wheelbase Maruti Swift. So this is our newest activity. We have invested a lot of money into our vision of actually transiting from purely a design and development organization to one that is also able to produce through our capabilities niche volume cars. And the market positioning is to create a segment where none exists. So this is the first one. You've seen example, I think, in your property. We went into production in the month of May, June of this year. We've got fantastic reviews from our customers, and it has created a whole new segment where none existed. Again, backed up by the premise that we will go into areas where a car manufacturer will not or cannot enter. Of course, this is a supercar. It's a mid-engine, thoroughbred supercar. These are the forthcoming ones. This is going to hit the roads in 2017 end or 18 thereabouts. Some of the OEM projects that we have done for car makers, and these are the images we are able to show you because they have found their way into the public domain or car manufacturers have spoken about them. 90% of the OEM projects that we do, we even don't have photographs because they're very confidential in nature. This is the first breakthrough. It's also fantastic achievement that our first breakthrough was not some bread and butter car brand, but the highest value or the highest image car in the world, and that was the Aston. So we did this V8 Vantage in 2003. Of course, it went into production in 2005. It still is in production. It was voted sometime 5 or 6 years back by BBC Top Gear as the most beautiful car in the world. This is already in production. You may have seen some examples on the roads. So the aviation exercises, we haven't done very many. We have done a Gulfstream 550 for a client in the Middle East, and the civilian version of the Dhruv helicopter. This is my personal hobby. While I'm at work, I try to pack in a lot of output on a given day, and these are sculptures that are actually influenced from automotive forms. Some of the citations that we spoke earlier, we won't delve into that. So we're very proud of the fact that we have over almost 4 million people who like us. It's not very easy to get that number, and that's about it. Thank you, I think. Yeah.
I think all of us are already inspired, but what you need to do not only to get inspired, but also be obsessively passionate, as Mr. Chhabria says. A big round of applause for Mr. Chhabria. And May I request you to come up with your questions? We can. I mean, he can accept some of the questions. 10 minutes are there. So I particularly request the young minds first.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much, sir, for your excellent spellbinding lecture. Can we have a copy of your lecture so that we can see it in our spare time, because it was too content rich, we couldn't get everything.
Yes, of course. Your folks here have the, I think they've downloaded the presentation. You can take from them. It's not, I mean, it's not.
One small suggestion is that the richest people in the billionaires spend most of their money on yachts.
Yes.
So I'm sure you'll be making yachts too.
Well, we have ambition too, but India lacks maritime facilities in that sense. So we are, we think we would be able to really, you know, create good yacht products as well. And we have to actually create a business development cell to be able to go and promote that kind of business. It fits in our USPs of arbitraging labor, creativity, craftsmanship, and all that. And coming from the background of what we have, you know, done or showcased in the automotive field, we think we are eminently suitable to do that. But we haven't really attempted very seriously as of now. Thank you.
Sir, is India going to see automated cars from DC very soon?
Automated?
Yes, sir. Like Tesla S?
No, let me tell you, we are very narrowly focused on our core competency, that is body design. We are not into engines or automation and things like that. Though in the pursuit of body design, whatever innovations we have to do from a digital point of view, we have to do, for example, you know, digital instruments or entertainment systems. But as far as we are concerned, we are not in that territory. And you know, to be very honest with you, we don't even care whether a car has an engine or not. We are narrowly focused on our creativity. Thank you.
Sir, it was pleasure attending your lecture. So
it's not audible.
Yeah.
Sir, it was pleasure attending your lecture. You said that when you design a car, you keep three factors in your mind: comfort, ambience, and design. So, sir, when you design a car like Innova, then space in it gets reduced. Like when we purchase an Innova, we have space for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 people. And when you design Innova, it has space less. So, do you think about that?
Well, as I said, we create special niches which a manufacturer will not or cannot cater to. So in the sense, there may not be enough customers for the Toyota Motor Corporation to create an Innova like us, but it's big enough for us. So we have to really select those niches. And that's what a company is all about, to be able to do what a manufacturer will not or cannot do. So there are enough customers, for us at least, who want a business class lounge Innova, but they might not be enough for Toyota Motor Corporation, and that's really the essence of it.
Hello. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Sure. Actually, when I am getting into the automotive industry, so first name is yours, Dilip Chhabria. So actually, what we are doing now, just in my BTech final year project, I just put a design of Formula 1 in my project. So I have made it that one, and now I am doing MTech in research in aerodynamic principle. Now, and in second stage, I have also made a F1 design also, and just I have put both the design I have made in 1000 cc of engine, and in speed cushion, fast design reduce up to 90 kilometer per speed, and in second that is 110 kilometer, And my question is, I have just changed my aerodynamic principle and the material. So anything extra means what to means any suggestion for increase the speed of that? I don't want to put a engine extra. I have only putting the 1000 cc of engine in that, and I want to know what is the extra thing I will put that, so it will be the speed will be increased.
Well, I can't answer you a question offhand, except to say that you have to not dump the principles of aerodynamics. Just about all. But this is a very specific, very technical question. I'm sorry, I can't really, enumerate those examples. As far as we are concerned, as long as your vehicles are more streamlined than when you started from, you tend to be far more aerodynamically efficient. That's been our experience, because one-off cars, concept cars, are never really tested for aerodynamics. For example, even the Avanti, because we were putting into production, we had to ensure that it went through the aerodynamic wind tunnel test. We never really on the drawing board catered for that specialization, but it came out as a winner because we were following the tried and tested formulae of aerodynamics. It's actually very simple and commonsensical.
Thank you, sir. Sir, actually, we have a group of people. So, can we have a meeting at your institute anytime?
I can't understand this question.
They have a group of people. Is it possible to have a meeting there sometime?
Yes, of course, you can write to us, and if you come visiting to us, we'll be glad to showcase or to answer what your queries would be.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Sir, I have two questions with me. First question is, sir, what are your future prospects and goals? And second question is, how you sharpen your imagination skills to design so awesome cars and vehicles?
What was the first question?
So first question was, sir, what are your future prospects and goals?
Well, that was clearly laid out. Future prospects and goals are to sustain our fierce independent status, and to do that, we are forced to go into volume manufacturing of special products so that we remain independent. We are not doing this manufacturing program because we want to be a car maker. We are doing it so that we continuously grow on our skills as the world's fiercely independent development center. That is one goal. And the second part of your question was, what was it? No, it's very simple. I think, once you have an eponymous company, the company is named after you, so you're trying to put your best foot forward all the time. And I think that comes quite easily once you have tasted the initial rounds of success. It actually builds up on that. I know to some of you might seem very, very big to understand how we create, but it comes off quite seamlessly to the whole organization. Once you finish a project, or once you have finished several projects, you want to get down to your next, and the market positioning decides what project you should do so that you're able to stand out.